There is no prisoner more miserable than him. To make it to his daughter's 8th birthday, Cameron, who was just granted parole, boarded a plane transporting maximum security prisoners, but unexpectedly a shocking prison break arrived unannounced. As the prison guards closed all the cabin doors, the heavy criminals on board immediately began their long-planned escape plot. Diamond Dog and Cyrus, who were held in solitary confinement, rubbed against the calluses on their hands and in a short while pulled out a steel needle hidden inside. Then he put the steel needle into the keyhole and stirred it around, opening the handcuffs with ease. At the same time, Pinball, sitting in economy class, also began his move. He stuck his fingers into his mouth and the next second pulled out a 1-meter-long fishing line from between his teeth. With a dry heave, Pinball pulled out an oil paper packet he previously swallowed, and inside it was a match and a small bottle of gasoline. At this moment, Cyrus gave a look, and Pinball immediately understood. He squeezed gasoline onto the pants of the prisoner next to him. Subsequently, he lit the match and threw it over. The next second, a ball of fire immediately ignited on that prisoner's body. In order to prevent the fire from spreading, the female guard nearby had to unlock Pinball's shackles. Unexpectedly, this played right into his hands as he quietly stole the keys from the female guard's waist and then opened the iron gates holding Diamond Dog and Cyrus. Diamond Dog, having escaped again, was like a brown bear, and in the next second pierced the neck of a nearby guard with his handcuffs. And Cyrus was even more ferocious, knocking out a guard with one punch before rushing directly toward the cockpit of the plane. Then he used chains to tightly strangle the co-pilot's arm holding the gun. After killing 2 unlucky prisoners in succession, he finally turned the tables on the co-pilot. Subsequently, Cyrus quickly controlled the captain driving the plane and threatened him not to report the situation inside the cabin. Then he shot and destroyed the plane's broadcast system. The chaotic cabin instantly returned to calm. The prisoners who regained their composure immediately fell into a frenzy. Only Cameron remained frowning. It turned out Cameron was originally a member of the U.S. Navy SEALs. 8 years ago, he accidentally killed a thug who was harassing his wife, which led the court to sentence him to 10 years in prison for manslaughter. And this also caused him to miss the important moment of his daughter's birth. For 8 years, he behaved well in prison, and he finally earned parole before his daughter's 8th birthday. He thought that taking this plane would be the fastest way to see the daughter he had never met, but unexpectedly, he encountered a hijacking. Just then, Willie, who had just unlocked his shackles, suddenly drew a gun and held Pinball hostage. It turned out he was an insider planted by the FBI to monitor the prisoners, and the quick-reacting Cyrus immediately hid behind the female guard, entering a standoff with him. To avoid greater casualties, Cameron nearby tried his best to persuade him not to act rashly. At this time, a prisoner preparing to sneak attack instantly attracted Willie's fire. Opposite him, Cyrus fired rapidly, directly killing Willie. Just like that. Within 10 short minutes, Cyrus completely controlled the entire plane. However, he still concealed an even bolder plan. After confirming the number of people getting on and off at the next stop from the sheriff, he immediately told everyone that the plane would land normally at the next stop.
Carson City. The law is down there. You lost your mind?
According to my last psych evaluation, yes.
It turned out this hijacking was all planned by Colombian terrorists. As long as they could successfully pick up Sandino at the next stop, he would pay $100 million in reward and arrange another plane to send them out of the United States. However, after an inspection by Pinball, the 2 prisoners who were supposed to get off at the next stop had been accidentally killed by Cyrus, so 2 volunteers had to be selected to take their places. Because the urgently needed insulin was smashed, Baby O immediately pulled Cameron to sign up, but since Baby O's skin color was different from those 2 prisoners, he was stopped by Cyrus behind him just as he stood up. Cameron told him not to worry, as he would call for help the moment he got off the plane. This way, the police on the ground would capture them all. However, he still underestimated Cyrus's cunning. Just to be safe, Cyrus actually ordered men to seal the mouths of the disembarking prisoners with tape. At the critical moment, Cameron had to change his plan. He claimed that he still had a 15-year sentence and also wanted to follow Cyrus to the beaches of Mexico to enjoy life. Given Cameron's performance in dissuading the FBI agent just now, Cyrus ordered his subordinates to unlock his shackles again and replaced him with a police officer. Cameron, who had regained his freedom, did not sit idle, and he immediately searched Willie's body. He found a hidden recording device on him, Then Cameron took advantage of the opportunity of changing the sheriff's clothes to quietly stuff the recording device into his arms. A few minutes later, the plane landed at Carson Airport for the prisoner transfer, although the airport was full of police with live ammunition. But it seemed like God was helping them, as a once-in-a-century dust storm actually kicked up near the airport. Under the cover of the sky filled with yellow sand, the entire prisoner exchange process did not reveal a single flaw. Not only that, but among the newly exchanged prisoners, there was even one who possessed professional aviation knowledge. As soon as he entered the cockpit of the plane, he immediately set about removing the plane's tracking device. Under the cover of the wind and sand, Pinball effortlessly sneaked into the hangar. Then he placed the tracking device inside the cabin of a sightseeing plane. At the same time, several prisoners who had just been escorted off the plane suddenly started causing a commotion in the prisoner transport van. The next second, the prisoner sitting in the front row was met with an iron fist from the prison guard. But as soon as the guard turned around, the recording device, which had been smashed by an iron bar on the prisoner's body, fell to the ground with a clang. The scene before his eyes instantly caused the guard to break out in a cold sweat. Under Cameron's gaze, the prisoner transport van, which had just driven off the runway, suddenly stopped. And this also allowed Cyrus to smell the scent of danger. He killed the stalling police officer with one shot. Subsequently, he issued the order for a forced takeoff before the main force returned. With a violent jolt, the plane finally flew out before the police arrived. And Cameron, whose plan had failed, could only continue to stay on the plane. He actively approached Cyrus, who planned the hijacking, to probe their next plan of action. Soon, the opportunity arrived. Because the landing gear was jammed by a foreign object, the plane could not pick up speed. So Diamond Dog took Cameron with him to jump into the wheel well to check the situation. They discovered that what was jamming the wheel was actually Pinball's corpse. It turned out that after successfully transferring the tracking device, he did not catch up to the plane, and not wanting to be left behind, he forcibly hugged the landing gear that was about to retract. Unexpectedly, he was crushed to death alive. Looking at the city below the plane, Cameron immediately realized that this was the best opportunity to call the police. So, taking advantage of the opportunity when Diamond Dog was checking the rear of the cabin, he used a pen to write the hijacker's criminal plan and the subsequent landing location on Pinball's shirt. Then he threw the body out of the plane. After more than 10 seconds of gravitational acceleration, Pinball's body smashed into a car waiting for a red light with a 360-degree aerial spin. And Larkin, who received the alarm, instantly became tense. Because the landing point marked on Pinball's corpse was completely opposite to the signal sent by the plane's tracking device. 20 minutes ago, Director Malloy had personally led 2 Sidewinder attack helicopters to chase at full speed along the signal emitted by the tracking device. Larkin immediately called Malloy and demanded that they turn around immediately and fly to Lerner Airfield 100 miles away. But Malloy, who was about to catch up with the target, did not believe any of his explanations at all and unceremoniously hung up Larkin's phone. But when Malloy caught up with the so-called target, as he wished, he discovered that he had been played by the prisoners once again. And Larkin, on the other end of the phone, did not sit still. Waiting for death, he drove the Corvette sports car Malloy had just bought and drove at full speed toward Lerner Airfield. After an hour of continuous driving, he finally arrived at Lerner Airfield, located in the desert, before the plane landed. But when he climbed up the airport's control tower, only then did he discover that the guide who was supposed to direct the takeoff and landing had been silenced. At the same time, the plane flown by the prisoners had also arrived over the airport. Because there was no one to guide them, the jailbird, which was forced to land, almost collided head-on with a small plane taxiing on the ground. Swamp Thing piloting the plane pulled up in an emergency, barely escaping disaster. But the plane's taxiing speed still exceeded the airport's minimum requirements, and the Colossus, weighing 150 tons, instantly turned on collision mode. Fortunately, Swamp Thing made a sharp turn into the sand pit at the end of the runway, and the plane finally stopped at the last moment of impact. But when Cyrus led Sandino out of the cabin, he did not see the plane promised earlier. Sandino hurriedly explained that the plane was already on the way and told him not to worry, but the naturally suspicious Cyrus was not reassured. He immediately arranged for everyone to work together to drag the plane stuck in the mud pit, ready to flee for their lives at any time. Just at this moment, Baby O, who was suffering from diabetes, could no longer hold on. To save his brother, with whom he had spent 8 years day and night, Cameron had to go alone into the hangar to find first aid medicine. Unexpectedly, the next second, he was sneak attacked from behind by a group of mysterious people. It turned out they were all members of a gang organization, and they had lurked here in advance just to take Sandino away alone. At the moment of life and death, Larkin, who was waiting for support on the periphery, arrived in time, and Cameron also took this opportunity to launch a counterattack against the three. In just the blink of an eye, the three gang members were all beaten to the ground, unable to get up. After confirming the identities of both parties, Larkin immediately requested Cameron to stay where he was and wait for support. But at this moment, Cameron insisted on returning, as the faith forged from years of military service made it impossible for him to abandon any friend. After asking Larkin to pass a message to his wife and daughter, he then turned and left. However, what neither of them noticed was that there was actually another gang member hiding on the plane. At the same time, the prisoner keeping watch on top of the control tower suddenly issued a warning to everyone. Diamond Dog and Cyrus hurriedly climbed up a dirt slope. Sure enough, they saw the sky filled with dust kicked up by the convoy of police cars. The time left for them to escape was at most only 10 minutes. And just at this moment, Sandino, who was pulling the plane quietly, ran toward the hangar a few hundred meters away. Hearing the noise, Larkin immediately rushed over. But the moment he lifted the curtain, the jet engine blasted him more than 10 meters away. At the critical moment, he suddenly spotted a crane off to the side. So he immediately jumped into the crane's cab at the fastest speed and successfully lowered the crane's boom 1 second before the plane took off. The violent collision instantly cut the cabin in half. The out-of-control nose of the plane then crashed into a nearby gas station. And hearing the commotion, Cyrus also rushed over at full speed with his subordinates. Seeing no way to escape, Sandino immediately begged bitterly for mercy. But what the vicious and cunning Cyrus hated most was betrayal. Sandino's death also completely extinguished all of Cyrus's illusions. They quickly retrieved the weapons placed in the plane's cargo hold and then used a makeshift sand table to deploy combat instructions to everyone. He ordered men to place a large number of gas canisters with open valves on both sides of the road, while the prisoners concealed themselves in the dark to form a crossfire. As soon as the pursuing soldiers entered the ambush position, the prisoners hiding in the dark opened fire, simultaneously detonating the gas canisters on both sides of the road. The entire passage was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. Taking advantage of the gap while the pursuers were temporarily suppressed, Cyrus immediately led everyone to board the plane and evacuate. But when the plane started again, they discovered that it had been tied to a stone pillar. It turned out that 2 minutes ago, Cameron, who had found the medicine and returned to the plane, had taken advantage of the chaos to tie the rope connected to the plane to a nearby stone pillar just in case. Cyrus hurriedly opened fire frantically at the stone pillar with his subordinates, although the dense rain of bullets quickly reduced the stone pillar to powder. But the rope flying out from inertia happened to hook onto Larkin's sports car parked inside the small wooden shed. At this moment, Malloy, who had just arrived, was preparing to open fire to intercept, but unexpectedly in the next second, he froze on the spot in shock. However, just as Malloy's words of self-comfort fell, the wreckage of the sports car that had crashed into the airport tower landed at his feet. And at this time, the prisoners inside the plane, having escaped death once again, all fell into a frenzy of celebration. But the inexplicable rope still aroused Cyrus's vigilance. He was certain that there must be a traitor on the plane. So he used the female officer's life as a threat, trying to force the lurking mole to reveal himself, to protect Cameron Baby. O voluntarily stood up and took the blame for everything, and Cyrus showed no mercy, shooting him directly to the ground. Although Baby O took a bullet for Cameron, but the cunning Cyrus still guessed that Cameron was the real mole. However, just as he took out the toy Cameron had prepared for his daughter to threaten him, the armed helicopter piloted by Malloy and Larkin finally arrived. Malloy, having been played twice in a row, did not hesitate to unleash a barrage of strafing fire at the plane's cabin, instantly blowing out the engine on the right side of the plane. Cameron looked at Baby O lying on the ground on the verge of death, and his pent-up anger finally erupted completely. Immediately, he stood up to engage in close-quarters combat with this group of villains. At this moment, Cameron, furious to the extreme, was like a super soldier, unstoppable, and he did not even care about being shot in the arm. In just a short dozen seconds, he single-handedly stormed into the cockpit and completely closed the 2 iron gates in the middle of the plane. Just at this moment, the plane had also arrived over Las Vegas, although Larkin told Cameron that the airport had already cleared a runway for them. But at that moment, with no fuel left, the plane could only choose to make an emergency landing in the city center. With a deafening crash, the Colossus weighing 150 tons smashed into the middle of the road almost vertically. The massive inertia caused the plane to crash toward the casino at the end of the road at a speed of over 200 miles per hour. After a journey of sparks and explosions, the plane finally came to a stop in the lobby of the casino. The The police arrived in time and immediately arrested most of the prisoners as soon as the plane stopped. Even the injured Baby O received proper medical treatment. But Cyrus and Diamond Dog, who planned the hijacking, were still nowhere to be found. It turned out they had long since blended into the crowd through the gap between the fuselage and the ground and fled the scene after stealing a fire truck. Fortunately, Cameron and Larkin discovered their tracks at the same time. The two coincidentally hopped onto nearby police motorcycles and chased after them at full speed. In a flash, the dazzling streets of Las Vegas turned into their racing arena. Facing Cyrus's water cannon attack, Cameron hit the throttle and seized the opportunity to grab the hanging ladder. And the motorcycle, flying straight out, accurately crashed into Diamond Dog, standing at the rear of the fire truck, blowing him to smithereens. However, the danger was still not lifted. At that moment, Cyrus repeatedly stabbed at Cameron with a pike pole, but Cameron snapped it in half and drove the broken shaft straight into his ankle. Then Cameron did a side flip up the ladder, and after giving Cyrus a violent beating, he locked him up with handcuffs. Subsequently, he turned on the ladder's lifting mechanism. At the same time, Larkin also took the opportunity to climb to the rear of the cab, found a fire axe on the truck, and used all his strength to smash through the roof of the cockpit. Immediately afterwards, he placed the fire truck's water hose into the cockpit. Soon, the fire truck, with obstructed vision, suffered a chain collision, and Swamp Thing, driving the vehicle, was immediately thrown out and died miserably on the spot. And the ladder where Cyrus was located slammed viciously into a pedestrian overpass, and he was subsequently thrown by inertia onto a conveyor belt at a construction site next door. Even worse, the end of the conveyor belt was actually a stone crushing machine. And before Cyrus could react, he was crushed into a pulp, and Cameron successfully jumped off at the last moment before the fire truck exploded. Accompanied by banknotes filling the sky, Cameron, who had experienced danger all the way, finally saw the daughter he had been longing for over 8 years.